On continuation.
Thank you. Biosecurity laws are incredibly important. It's important work, and the success of which is crucial to Australia's environment, agriculture and economy. Their work is especially important, highlighting the importance of addressing threats to the environment as well as agriculture and forestry, something that is incredibly important as we strive for a nature-positive environment and which is too often overlooked when we talk of biosecurity. The focus is on agriculture but not on biodiversity loss and risk to native flora and fauna through biosecurity risks. So that link has to be, and awareness needs to be increased from the Minister's perspective. I don't have to convince this parliament or the Australian people the significance of the threat of invasive species, diseases and pests posed to Australia's environment and economy. So our biosecurity system protects our agriculture, forestry and fisheries export industries, which are worth some $51 billion, a tourism sector worth $50 billion, environmental assets worth more than $5.7 trillion and more than 1.6 million jobs. Some of the top Australian biosecurity concerns include foot and mouth disease, which recently broke out in Indonesian cattle. An outbreak in Australia would cripple the livestock sector, cause immense animal suffering, destroy business for farmers, create food insecurity and have massive trade impacts for Australia. Another continuing threat is the fight to eradicate the Varroa mite in the New South Wales beehives. A year since it was first detected in Newcastle, new infestations continue to be discovered and eradication efforts will continue for at least 3 years. Beekeepers in my neighbouring electorate have sadly had to euthanise their hives to prevent the spread of this parasite, which has already caused tens of millions of dollars of financial loss. So the consequences to agriculture and the environment of a significantly reduced bee population are truly scary as well. So Australia is also struggling to contain the spread of red imported fire ants, which were first identified in Brisbane in 2001. When funding to eradicate the ants was prematurely reduced, new incursions led to several new populations spreading. Now, more than 20 years later, Australia is still striving to eliminate red fire ants, and populations have been found in Sydney. So if red fire ants become established in Australia, it's projected to cost us some $1.2 billion, along with more emergency room presentations, loss of use of outdoor spaces and some 40% reduction in farming output. Fire ants have caused more than 85 deaths in the United States and would have significant impacts on native wildlife. The discovery in February of the myrtle rust, a highly infectious and invasive fungus native to South America, has recently led to nearly 70% of Lord Howe Island being closed to non-essential visitors. Rust, like myrtle rust, spread rapidly over thousands of kilometres on wind currents and can cause huge loss in plant production. Myrtle rust on the east coast of Australia has already caused the near extinction of at least 3 rainforest species. In agriculture, wheat rust has been estimated to have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. So we've been lucky to date. We've only been subjected to the least dangerous form of the rust. We need greater assessment of the risks that rust and insects can pose to our native environment and improved prevention methods against their spread. Right now, in Western Australia, a borer mite is spreading, and if this gets to the east coast, it would have devastating impact. It impacts a wide variety of native species, including the Moreton Bay figs. Imagine Sydney's iconic parks like the Botanic Gardens or Hyde Park without those glorious trees. So it will also be difficult for Australians to forget the consequences of failing to prevent early human biosecurity breaches during the COVID pandemic. We've all become aware all too well of the importance. A report by the Inspector General of Biosecurity in relation to the Ruby Princess cruise ship prompted many of the amendments to the Biosecurity Act proposed by this bill. It was identified that the Biosecurity Act needed to be amended to provide greater flexibility in managing human biosecurity risks and greater penalties for breaches. So threats to Australia's biosecurity continue to grow each year. Australia is home to an extremely unique and fragile natural environment, and protecting it requires consistent adaptation and updating of our biosecurity practices. Threats to Australia's agricultural industry from pests and the like are extremely important and well publicised. However, it's equally important to remember that our natural environment is at risk of biosecurity threats as well. As we move towards rebuilding Australia's environment and meeting our climate targets of 2030, it's extremely important that our government remains focused on our environment. It's fragile, it's unique, and in many areas it's already under strain from the effects of climate change, so we must ensure that our biosecurity laws and processes are geared towards protecting the environment as much as agriculture. Since the year 2000, Australia has recorded some 136 incursions of 106 invasive species. These are species established in the wild that have been assessed as environmental invaders or noted as potentially having an environmental impact. The continuing increase in global trade, tourism and climate change exacerbates the risks of new incursions and the spread of existing pests and diseases. So I commend the government for strengthening the Biosecurity Act with these proposed amendments. But it's also vital that adequate resources be allocated to identification, eradication and enforcement of biosecurity risks. The funding needs to be ongoing and sustainable to safeguard our agricultural sector and ensure our natural environment is protected. Powers of enforcement and increased penalties will be useless if there are inadequate resources for contingency planning, surveillance programs, research and policing of biosecurity. Threats to biosecurity must be treated as seriously as cyber threats. A systemic program which includes key performance indicator measurements for compliance programs also should be introduced. In this regard, I support the position of the Invasive Species Council that the cost of biosecurity services should be primarily borne by risk creators, for example, the importers of exotic plants and animals. We must also strengthen the environmental biosecurity capacity, resourcing and focus so that it is on the same level as that of agriculture. So I urge the government to strengthen Australia's biosecurity by ensuring it's properly resourced and securely funded across all areas, from environment protection to agriculture as well. Thank you.